Hello, hello.
I'm Savannah.
And I'm Elysia.
And this is Burden of Proof. You guys, we're back.
It's been a minute.
Did you miss us?
We missed you.
You guys only missed a week, but we haven't been in the studio in
At least 2 weeks.
I think it's been 3.
Oh, it has been 3, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It went by very fast.
It did, yeah. Crazy.
Summer.
Yeah, summer just gets really busy and,
So we're back.
But we're back. Couple of announcements before we continue into the case. We have 2 new Patreons. Patrons on our Patreon.
Patreons.
We have 2 new Patreons. We have 2 new patrons on our Patreon. Shout out to Christy.
Thank you, Christy.
And shout out to Kimberly.
Thank you, Kimberly.
You guys, you're making us blush.
That was exciting.
Shout out to Christy, who joined 2 weeks ago, and we haven't recorded then. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a delay, but thank you.
Thanks.
And Kimberly, you were a nice surprise. We had no idea until we got on to double check everything before recording.
Yes.
And we were like, woo woo, look at that.
So fun. So thanks, guys.
Yes. And if you're listening and you're interested in being one of our patrons, it's just $3 a month for always ad-free content.
Yes.
A once a month live session, some bloopers or outtakes when we have good stuff.
When we get them.
I try not to make it too boring.
Right. we do leave the fun stuff, some of the fun stuff in. We also get to vote on an episode every month.
Yes.
And you get to chat with us. So it's super fun.
Yeah. That's actually the perfect segue because today is a patron chosen case.
Woohoo.
For July.
Lead the way.
So if we have no other news.
I think we're Gucci.
I'm not. I'm more like Kate Spade.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. That's the only other major designer that I could think of at the top of my head.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I would ever.
I'm not a fashionista.
No, neither am I. I wouldn't want it to be Gucci because women can't run Gucci. It's part of their bylaws. It's stupid.
What?
Yeah, I didn't fact check this. I did see it on a TikTok, but apparently the guy who founded it, Gucci himself, yep. No women. So I can't be Gucci, but you know what? I'm obsessed with the new Coach line that just came out, the Coachtopia. Anyway.
All right, so here we go. Are you ready?
I have no idea what this is about, so no.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No,
okay.
no
well,
idea.
This is a very interesting case, and I actually don't remember who originally, probably James.
I can go back and look while you talk.
I want to say it was James, our listener James, that has recommended a lot of good cases, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember for certain. This is the story of Sarah Jo Pender.
It was James.
All right.
In December of last year, sorry.
Thank you, James. Well, we had a long list for a while. Our list is shortening up, but we had a long list for a while. Sarah was born May 29th, 1979 in Indiana. Just 5 years old when her parents divorced and her mother moved to California, leaving Sarah and her sister behind with their father. But within 2 years, her mother was back in Indiana and they were all living, she pretty much grew up in the Indianapolis area.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah and her sister would then spend weekends and summer with their mother. And like many families, there were continuous struggles. And by the time Sarah was a teen, she was seeking a way to fill the void left by that upbringing, including unhealthy relationships with boys, drugs, and alcohol.
I was gonna say there's gonna be some men.
There are some men. Sarah says that by her senior year of high school, she had let go of the rebellious phase, though, and graduated with the intention of attending college. And she was actually accepted into Purdue University.
Oh, okay.
Which is a good school from what I remember. That was one of the schools that lots of people talked about when I was in high school. So
okay.
And she's my age. So
makes sense.
It was kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So her future's looking bright. Unfortunately, after just 1 year, she faced a financial shortfall and made the decision to withdraw so she could work full-time. She got a job as a secretary at a small construction firm, but quickly worked her way up to assisting with blueprints.
Cool.
She was even offered the opportunity to attend drafting school so she could design and draw up estimates for clients. At 21 years old, that's impressive.
Yeah.
You're Gucci.
Yeah, you're Gucci.
She said life was really good at that time. She was independent, she had zero debt, and she was looking forward to whatever came next. Well, what came next was 22-year-old Richard Hull. They met at a concert in July of 2000, and for all of our Gen Xers, I read somewhere that they met at a Fish concert. So...
That's fish with a PH.
Yes, that's fish with a PH. So the two of them hit it off and were inseparable pretty much instantly.
Okay.
Within 1 month of meeting Richard, he moved in with Sarah, and they could only talk of their future together.
Yeah, you don't have a present yet. You don't have a past yet. You can't. It goes past present, future. You got to do it in order.
Mm-hmm. And apparently, the couple neglected to truly acknowledge the obstacles that Richard faced in the whole grand scheme of like living the white picket fence life. Okay. First of all, he was unemployed.
That's why he's living with her for free.
But more importantly, he was a felon.
Okay.
He had a history of drug use, which he pretty much blamed his crimes on. I think his crimes were surrounding like drugs, possibly like a robbery situation.
Right.
I could not confirm all of that exactly. But Sarah said, his past doesn't matter. I have a past too. We've all done things that we regret.
I can fix him.
She told her mom that Richard treated her with such attention and kindness that she wasn't willing to walk away because of the mistakes he had made in his past.
Okay.
Are you cringing yet?
Yeah, can you not see my face?
Well, be careful. You might get a cramp after this.
Oh, no.
After what comes next. Just days after Richard moved in, he asked if a friend of his and the friend's girlfriend could crash with them for a few days.
No.
Then he explained that they had just left a halfway house and that they were just down on their luck.
Double no.
Sarah said, well, we've all been there. We all have a past.
I understand what she's saying. I have empathy for the situation. I do. But it's also like, you have to worry about your safety, babe. Your safety, babe.
Glad you said that, because she also said, well, Richard vouched for them. So I don't
trust Richard with your safety either.
So I trusted them to come and stay, and she agreed that they could come and stay. The couple were 24-year-old Andrew Cataldi and 25-year-old Tricia Nordman. And the truth is that they were fugitives from a prison in Nevada.
They a long way from home.
Tricia had been serving time on a forgery conviction, and Andrew on possession of methamphetamine with intent to distribute. It's not clear as to when Sarah found out the truth about the couples.
Right, they're not from a halfway house.
Or the couple, I should say. But she claims that all was well. When they first arrived, the four of them got along fabulously. So much so that within a week of them arriving, they decided, we are all the best of friends. We should all rent a house together.
You're right, my face is going to get stuck like this. Maybe not.
So let's break that down just a little bit.
I don't want
in
to.
case anybody has missed the timeline, okay? 21-year-old Sarah went from being a single, independent young woman with a promising career path to moving in with her boyfriend and another couple, all of whom she doesn't really know, and who are all unemployed convicts within a month to 6 weeks.
So, where does she think they're going to get their portion of rent?
That's a great question. And we will get there.
Because we got bills to pay, babe.
Exactly. She said that she didn't think much of it because it wasn't much different than in college where most people live with roommates they didn't know prior.
I mean, I can understand why you would say that. I don't think that it's accurate.
I was going to say most college kids didn't just get out of prison.
Right. I understand her thinking, like, because you do the thing where you're like, okay, this is the most like this situation that I was in. Yeah. It is the most like her first year of college. Her only year of college. It is a lot like that. However, key differences, you know?
Agreed. It's funny you should say that. My next note was, however, it was different.
It was different. It is different.
It is different. Sarah was the only one with a job, as you said. But Richard told her not to worry because the three of them were gonna start selling drugs.
Don't worry, babe. We got this, okay? I'm gonna work with Big Daddy over here and we are gonna sell the crap out of some meth and we're gonna make rent. It's gonna be fine. He's a pro, okay? And I'm a prodigy, so just trust us. That's my impression.
Sarah agreed to it under the condition that they not sell it out of the house.
But why is that the condition? The condition should be no, go work at Taco Bell. The condition should be...
They can't because they're all felons. Two of them are on the run.
Does Taco Bell discriminate? Taco Bell doesn't hire felons?
I think even fast food places, they don't do background checks, but they ask you if you have a conviction.
They do, but I don't think they can discriminate based on that. Just because they say they can't doesn't mean they don't.
That's what I was thinking.
I've worked at places where they're like, yeah, but we don't want to hire them because of this reason. And I'm like, we can't do that. And they're like, we don't care.
How are they going to prove it?
How are they going to prove it?
Exactly.
Well, I don't work at those places.
We all know what happens.
They sell drugs out of the house because of course they do.
For the first few weeks, everything went well. Sarah says that she barely saw Andrew and Tricia, and she believed all was well amongst the entrepreneurs of the house.
Entrepreneurs? Okay.
But by the end of September, she says she came home from work one day to a hole in the wall.
Like, describe the hole? Like Kyle punched? Okay.
Yeah. According to Richard, Andrew punched the wall during a disagreement over the products that they were selling.
I want fentanyl. I don't want fentanyl.
Here's where things get a little tricky, because up to this point, I haven't really expressed this about Sarah. Sarah sounds like nice, has it together, right. But she too actually was guilty, as they all were, of using some of their products.
Right. Which you're not going to be a successful drug dealer if you're using.
Correct.
From the entrepreneurship perspective, obviously this is a business that they're running, Elysia.
Yes, agreed. Don't use up your products.
Yeah,
that's why
I couldn't work at Lush.
That's why I can't work in a bakery.
Right. Like,
I want to, but I can't.
No, right.
Yeah. So they would party together some and use the drugs. However, Richard claimed that Andrew was abusing the drugs regularly, which made him difficult to work with, on top of the fact that it was, as you said, cutting the potential profit.
Right.
According to both Sarah and Richard, Sarah asked him to stop selling drugs and just go get a job so that they could move out and settle down with their white picket fence.
Yeah, their future, babe. Their future.
So Richard said that he couldn't do that. I can't back out of this, babe. They do seem like they'd call each other babe.
Every other word is babe.
Yeah.
Every other word is babe.
Yeah. Yeah. But he would compromise, babe. And he would get a part-time job.
Babe.
Unfortunately, this only created more problems between Richard and the roommates.
Right, because they need him pushing.
Yes, because he took a job bouncing at a nearby club, which meant that he was taking away from the most profitable hours that he could be selling, like Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. Sarah grew increasingly uncomfortable with the fighting and tension in the house and told Richard he needed to do something because she could not continue living like this.
Babe, stop fighting and punching things, babe. Sorry, this is starting to feel disrespectful. I gotta stop.
Now, this is where the truth becomes muddled, and the only people who know it are Richard and Sarah.
And they probably have different definitions of the actual truth.
Well, it goes back and forth, as you will find.
All right.
But on the evening of October 23rd, 2000, Richard borrowed a truck from his friend Ronnie Herron for supposedly the purpose of moving stuff out of the basement of their house because it was purported that Andrew wanted to start making meth. My thing with that is, but wait, Sarah didn't want you selling drugs out of the house, but she's okay with you turning the house into a meth lab?
Right. Yeah.
That's a little strange, but who knows? According to their neighbor, Jana Frederick, Richard had asked her boyfriend's son if he could buy a gun from him because, of course, he was a felon, so he could not purchase one legally.
Right.
That kind of happened around the same time, maybe a little bit before he got the truck. Okay. When that didn't work out, he took Sarah to the local Walmart the morning of October 24th, the day after getting the truck, where she purchased a shotgun. And the clerk would later tell cops she purchased it, but Richard chose the ammunition. Sarah claimed that she thought he wanted the gun to go hunting, like that they had been talking about going shooting or hunting for fun.
Okay.
And she knew he couldn't purchase one himself. So, once again, I'm not going to question it. Everybody has a past.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their things.
Babe, but you didn't mean it when you did that. It's fine.
That evening, Richard and Sarah left for a night out with Sarah's family and came home around 11 p.m. An argument broke out between Richard and Andrew, so Sarah says that she took a walk through the neighborhood at 11 p.m. or past 11 p.m. I mean...
No, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying.
No, I don't walk around at 11 o'clock.
I would question that, but some women do. So, you know.
Some people don't run a true crime podcast.
Exactly. You know? That's exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So Richard claims that the fight was about his sister Tabitha owing Andrew money and that Andrew went into Richard and Sarah's room where he knew they had just purchased that gun. Richard says that Andrew grabbed the gun and said he was going to kill all of Richard's family. So Richard fought to get the gun away from Andrew and proceeded to shoot him. He shot him in the chest, and then he went into the living room, and he shot Tricia.
On accident, I'm sure.
Once in the head, once in the chest.
Yeah, that sounds like an accident. It sounds like it was self-defense, Elysia.
That's what he said.
No, that's ridiculous. What? Please stop killing people. Please stop.
Please stop.
Please stop.
By the time Sarah got back to the house, it was over. Both Andrew and Tricia were dead. Dude used deer slugs.
Oh, God.
So it was messy. It was very messy.
Yeah, that's not good.
There was no way they were surviving.
No.
So basically, Sarah eventually admits that she didn't know what to do. So she foolishly agreed to help move at least one of the bodies. Richard had already started loading, I believe he moved Andrew first.
Right.
Into the back of said borrowed truck. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And Sarah gets back and sees, holy crap, what the hell happened? But she didn't know what to do, is her claim. And apparently she was scared.
I mean, I get that. I can understand that. I can understand walking into a situation like this and being like, where do you even start? What do you do?
Yeah.
You know?
They loaded them up in the borrowed truck and they took them to a dumpster behind the local Teamsters headquarters, just blocks away from their house. They didn't even go very far.
They're just going to put whole bodies in a dumpster?
Yes.
Okay.
They then went back home where Sarah cleaned herself up and went to work for the day. And Richard began cleaning up the scene. He rented a carpet cleaner, but was stuck when he realized he needed an adapter because it was kind of one of those industrial kind of things. So to plug it into a regular outlet in the wall, he needed a special adapter. And he turned to a neighbor to borrow said adapter.
This may not be the time to borrow things. You don't really want to tell people that you're doing anything.
Exactly.
And you should just go to Home Depot, buddy.
Yeah. When Sarah left work, the two of them drove to Noblesville, Indiana, where the friend of his that he borrowed the truck, they went to return the truck. And apparently Richard's family also lives in that area. While there, Richard supposedly burned several blood-stained items, and he neglected to clean the truck.
I was literally just about to say, he gave this truck back dirty, didn't he?
I believe he did, yes.
Wow.
Or not cleaned very well.
Wow.
Meanwhile, that evening, a member of the Teamsters found the bodies of Andrew and Tricia in the dumpster. And local detectives found a bag of methamphetamine in Andrew's pocket, leading them to believe it was drug-related. But then they realized, well, the bodies have been moved here because there's not much blood in the dumpster or around the dumpster. This implied that there's a relationship. It may have been about drugs, but they automatically know, somebody wanted to get away from these bodies.
Right.
To first try to identify the bodies, though, they ran their fingerprints through the local system, but came up with no match.
Well, that's interesting, because they're felons.
Through the local system.
Oh, right. I guess that's true.
They sent them off, their fingerprints off to be processed at the state and federal levels. And in the meantime, they sent out press releases, with local news, with pictures of the couple's tattoos. They had very distinct tattoos, so they were hoping someone would know them. They could not take pictures of their faces, especially Tricia's, but luckily, the tattoos paid off. A neighbor called and confirmed that they knew who the couple were and that they lived in a home on South Michael Street with another young couple. Shortly after, the prints came back as a match and confirmed that, yes, this is Andrew Cataldi and Tricia Nordman. Of course, giving mug shots that they could then use to canvass the neighborhood. Detectives spoke with Sarah and Richard's landlord, who informed them that, around the same time that Andrew and Tricia disappeared, so did Richard and Sarah. So, they obtained a search warrant and pretty much could tell immediately that this is a crime scene.
Yeah, because they never went and got the adapter.
Oh, he did.
Oh.
He tried to clean. He just did not do a very good job at all. His cleaning efforts were lackluster at best.
Babe, blood, soap, and cold water.
The carpet cleaner apparently did not do the trick. So he simply moved furniture over it. Yeah. So he shot Andrew in the bedroom at the end of the bed or something. So he pulled the bed out from the wall a little bit to cover it. And then he moved the couch to the middle of the room.
Seems like a very man job.
He neglected to clean blood spatter from the walls or even the furniture. Like, the couch still had blood spatter on it. So all he did was, like, cover up the giant puddles of blood where there were. But yeah, it was bad. So
my face is getting stuck in the cringe position, you guys.
Yes. Not only did the canvas of the neighborhood turn up a neighbor who saw two people loading big things into the truck, but also the neighbor who lent Richard the adapter. Then they found out, I believe they may have found this out from Jana Frederick, who called in the first place about the gun, him asking her boyfriend's son about the gun. I believe she may have also been the one to tell them, like, tensions have been running high. Okay. They've been fighting. Okay. It's been an issue. And within 24 hours of finding Andrew and Tricia's bodies, they were pretty sure that they had a good picture of what probably happened and that Richard and or Sarah were responsible. But they needed to find them. Well, Richard's criminal record is what helped with that. They found an address for his family in Noblesville and began surveillance on the home.
Right.
And literally within hours, just a few hours after they started surveillance, Richard and Sarah showed up. The couple were immediately taken into custody and brought to the local Noblesville police station for questioning. Sarah claimed that she thought she was just going to be arrested for, like, marijuana possession or something.
No, babe. No, this is not. No.
So she didn't, like, ask for an attorney. She's just like, what? Okay. Like, I know I'm in trouble, but she didn't seem to have a real grasp, or so she says. She didn't have a grasp as to how serious it was.
That really doesn't vibe with me. I don't believe that.
Until, like, they really got into the more serious questioning, and she still didn't ask for an attorney because she didn't think it. She's like, I didn't do this. Detectives, of course, did suspect that Richard was the actual shooter, so they began questioning her first. And she was open and honest with them. She told them about the fight and that she took her walk to go buy cigarettes. She claimed that when she got back and asked what happened, Richard told her, shut up and get in the truck. She said she was too scared to ask any more questions of Richard because she thought he might kill me too. Like, he just looked. She said something about his pupils being dilated and he just was all hopped up on adrenaline.
Was it adrenaline?
Probably both. Right. Probably multiple things. She did admit that it was her idea to leave the house because she told Richard she couldn't stay in a house where two people were just killed. So they got a hotel room just outside the city. When detectives then turned to question Richard, his story was actually very similar to Sarah's. But he swore he shot them in self-defense, as I said.
Right.
Detectives didn't really believe that, though, mostly because Tricia was in a different room.
Yeah.
She was shot twice, like, basically point blank.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least with Tricia, it was not self-defense. With Andrew, maybe.
Yeah, and we'll get to that because forensics does sort of sort the matter out. And there was no indication that Tricia had any weapon or was doing anything. Actually, even when Sarah talks about the fights that they had, it sounds like Tricia was present, but she really wasn't. The fighting was between Andrew and Richard, and she was in the next room when he shot Andrew.
Was not involved.
So I don't even know that she was, like, trying to get in the way of the fight at all.
Right.
By the evening of October 27th, 2 days after the shooting, police arrested Richard and charged him with 2 counts of murder. Sarah was treated as a key witness initially, and on October 28th, she went back to the station and sat down with law enforcement again to give her full statement. She also turned over a pair of pants containing bloodstains that belonged to Richard.
Okay.
And the pants were tested, and the blood did match Andrew and Tricia. So Sarah was free to go, and detectives believed she's just a young woman who got caught up with the wrong guy, just made really bad choices.
Okay.
The investigation continued, and forensics confirmed that Andrew was shot in the bedroom, as I said, but they found that the bullet entered his chest from a 30-degree downward angle, meaning Andrew was on his knees when he was shot, based on his height and Richard's height.
Huh.
And the angle of the gun.
Well, that's weird.
Mm-hmm. They also found that Tricia was likely sitting on or near the couch when she was shot, not really supporting a self-defense claim. Still, there was no connection to Sarah until they searched the hotel room where Richard and Sarah were staying and found the gun along with the receipt for the gun, which proves Sarah purchased it the morning before the murders.
Right.
Detectives began questioning Sarah's actions, so they decided to look into it further. They went to her workplace to speak with her, but while there, they spoke with several of her coworkers who claimed that the day she went to work after the murders, she seemed perfectly fine. Even acted more upbeat than usual.
Okay.
They also spoke to one coworker who said days before the murder, Sarah had confided to them that she was sick of her roommates and wanted to get rid of them.
Interesting.
Detectives no longer believed that she was just an innocent bystander.
Right. Well, I mean, at the very least, she provided a gun to a felon.
Yeah. They brought her in for another round of questioning, and even after they informed her of her rights, she agreed to talk without an attorney because she said, I have nothing to hide.
Homie, I think you might. And also, always get an attorney, please.
Mm-hmm. She went through pretty much the same story, except that this time, she said that Richard asked her to leave, saying it was going to get ugly. Like when the fight broke out.
Right.
That she didn't do so of her own volition.
Right.
She claimed that she agreed to leave because she didn't want to deal with their fighting anymore. And when she got back, the front door had been locked, even though she hadn't taken her keys with her. So she walked around to the back of the house, and she said that she saw the trail of blood out the door to the truck. And in a TV interview, she literally says, I was that stupid girl, the stupid white girl in the movie that follows the trail of blood.
Baby, I'm sorry. This whole story has been you being...
Yeah, really.
I mean, I'm not trying to be... I'm just like, you met this guy, you moved in with him, you moved in with people that you... Like, this is just...
Yeah.
This was a recipe for badness. I'm sorry.
And she admits that.
Yeah.
Like, she wholeheartedly is like, I was stupid. I made really bad decisions.
Because, I mean, we're the same age. She was 21. I'm 22.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell I would be making these choices.
Yes. Yeah. But there are a lot of 21-year-olds who make really bad choices like that. So that's the whole problem with this whole thing and how it's become what it is because her story is plausible. But there is that element of doubt of like, it could go either way.
Right. Well, and part of me just doesn't seem like she seems like a mastermind, you know? Oh.
Well, we'll see. It's up for debate. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, she was clearly intelligent. I know that. It's just like...
She is very intelligent.
She doesn't seem to be making their best choices when it comes to like her personal relationships.
Yeah. I don't know how emotionally intelligent she was.
Right.
But she was clearly... intellectually
and with her family background, like emotional intelligence, like that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. So she follows the trail of blood into the house, and she finds Richard dragging Tricia, and he stopped for a moment to tell her what happened, and she didn't know what to do because she realized, like, oh, this trail of blood is from him. He already took Andrew. and put him in the truck.
Right.
So he must be dead too. And she was scared, and she said that she thought he would do the same thing to her.
Which, fair enough.
So they asked her about the shotgun, and she claimed that they had discussed, as I said, they had discussed going hunting or shooting for some time, but that Richard had all of a sudden suggested, hey, why don't we really go do that? Why don't we go this weekend? And so she agreed to buy it right then because he was like,
I want to go now,
let's go shooting this weekend.
It's my dream to go shooting. I've always wanted to go shooting, and I can't because you won't buy me a gun.
So Sarah maintained that she thought if she told them the truth, she may be in trouble on some level, but not held responsible for the murders, which is why she didn't ask for an attorney. She's like, I knew that I would get into some kind of trouble for like helping him move the bodies.
Right.
But I didn't think that I would be caught up on murder charges, basically. However, police felt confident that she was the mastermind behind it all, and they arrested her and charged her with 2 counts of murder as well.
Okay, well, now it feels a little sexist, in my opinion. My first thought was, they just want to blame a woman. I don't know why I got that feeling, because there's no evidence that points to that. Anyway.
I don't know that you're alone there.
Because it just doesn't make any sense that she would have instigated that. I mean, yeah, she wanted her roommates out, but she's never shown any indication of murder being the only resort.
True. That's, like I said, her story is plausible from her perspective.
Yes.
Everybody complains about roommates. Lots of people are like, oh, yeah, I can't wait to get rid of my roommate or to move out or to whatever. But it could also mean that she is truly wanting to get rid of her roommate.
I mean,
it's hard to say. That's why I said her and Richard are the only ones that
they really
know
are
the truth. So here we go. Hold on to your butt. Because
I hope you picked that up. I just grabbed the chair. It's funny.
You're like, man, your butt sounds weird.
They're like, your butt sounds very upholsterized. Upholsterized? Is that
upholsterized? We're just over here making up words.
What would be that version of upholstery? Your butt sounds like upholstery, or sounds upholstered. Okay, grammar lessons.
All right, so Sarah was arrested and awaited a trial for nearly 2 years. They offered her a plea deal for a lesser charge, but she refused to plead guilty to something she said she did not do.
I mean, fair enough, girly.
She also says that at the time, she felt that her charges were possibly just leverage to keep her on the hook to testify against Richard. Because her and Richard were still very much in love.
Okay, girly.
She was willing to testify against him, but she felt that the cops thought that maybe she wouldn't.
Wasn't, yeah.
Because she was still in love with him.
Right. I mean, that's fine, but they're not going to hold you on murder charges for that.
However, Richard ended up turning on her first.
Well, yeah, obviously.
6 months before her trial, Richard made a plea deal with prosecutors that he would plead guilty to accessory and testify that Sarah was actually the one who killed the couple. He even provided proof in a letter that Sarah supposedly wrote to him while they were both awaiting trial.
What year is their trial, do you know?
2002.
Okay, so are handwriting experts at their peak at this point?
You'll find out.
Okay.
The letter was basically an admission to killing Andrew and Tricia in a drug-induced rage and thanking Richard for taking the fall. Sarah had been writing letters to Richard during that time, but she says she never wrote that one, and despite all 80 or so letters that she did write to him being in cursive, and that one being printed.
So it doesn't take an expert at all.
Prosecutor Larry Sells was on board either way. He believed it didn't matter which one of them pulled the trigger. He was convinced that she was the mastermind behind the entire thing. Her defense attorney argued that Sarah was only a scared young woman doing what she thought she had to in order to survive, and that the letter Richard presented to the prosecution had to be forged. The prosecution no longer wanted to put Richard on the stand for obvious reasons, credibility. So they had a handwriting expert testify instead.
Oh my gosh, this is not going to go well, is it?
The expert testified that it was a match to Sarah's writing.
How? I'm assuming they gave samples of her print, I guess.
Yes.
So dumb.
Prosecution called the neighbor who saw two people loading something into the truck to testify.
Okay.
That person could not say it was definitively Sarah because it was like 3 a.m. in the morning.
Right. Just saw a person.
They could only say that it was two relatively tall adults.
Okay.
Still, Sarah's defense could offer no real proof that she hadn't been involved in the moving of the bodies, since she had admitted in her own statements to police that the bodies were still at the house when she returned home, and that, yes, okay, he moved Andrew into the truck, but yes, I helped with Tricia, and then I went to the dumpster with him. They couldn't really prove, because again, it goes back to she had a public defender, I believe.
Right.
And she didn't have the money to hire her own handwriting expert.
It's so expensive.
Or, find a way to prove that letter to Richard was not hers.
I've worked with handwriting experts before. It's very difficult work and it is very expensive.
Her attorney advised her not to take the stand, which it sounds like she wasn't real happy about, but she complied at the request of her mom or her family. Okay. She still truly believed that the jury would see that she was only an accessory after the fact, and she would possibly even get released because she had already served 2 years.
Based on the way that you said that, though.
Mm-mm. The jury took just a short time for deliberation to decide that Sarah was guilty on 2 counts of murder.
Wow.
In August of 2002, she faced her sentencing hearing, where prosecutor Larry Sells went so far as to refer to her as a female Charles Manson.
Oh my gosh.
Which took off in the media.
And that's not even remotely true. Was she 4'10"? I thought you said relatively tall adults. So not Charles Manson, because he was a short.
A short king.
A short king.
As my children would say. The judge sentenced her to 2 consecutive terms of 50 and 60 years, or 110 years altogether. 5 months after her trial, Richard Hall faced his hearing, where he pled guilty. The judge considered a number of aggravating and mitigating factors, just a few mitigating factors. Richard's sentence was ordered in a somewhat complicated way. This doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but bear with me as I go through it. And it may make sense to you, but I personally have not ever heard of this. Okay. He was sentenced to 65 years for each count, but the judge ordered that only 10 years of the second count be served consecutively, and the remaining 55 would be served concurrently. Okay. So that ultimately meant that he was sentenced to 75 years.
Right.
Minus the 860 days that he had already served.
Right. I mean, I understand it. I don't know why he would do it, but I can. You
will understand in a moment.
Okay.
But we'll get there.
Okay.
Both Richard and Sarah were serving their time, and as expected, Sarah appealed her conviction. Richard appealed his sentencing. Richard's appeal claimed that the uncustomary way that the judge crafted his sentence was illegal because it created a 10-year delay in his sentence for the second count And that is apparently against the law.
But I think that was the point.
Because he like split it up, I guess.
Yeah.
Because people get consecutive terms all the time, which delays the second count. So I think it's because he like split it up, it like made it technically illegal. They also argued that the sentence was inconsistent with the plea agreement, which stated, quote, that the trial court could not sentence him to more than 45 years on either count and still have executed time left to attribute to the other count of murder. So I think that that's why the judge did it. Yeah. He was actually cutting him a break. So be careful what you appeal, because the appellate court vacated his sentence and remanded it back to the trial court with instructions that a new sentence be crafted within the parameters of the plea agreement and law. But in the meantime, during a hearing for Sarah's appeal, Richard recanted his claim about the confession letter that he had provided the attorneys with, right?
Yeah.
He signed an affidavit explaining that he had hoped it would get him a better plea deal in less time, so he had a fellow inmate write it in exchange for protection because that inmate was like one of the smallest guys on the cell block. Unfortunately for both Richard and Sarah, this was not good.
No.
Because in his case, when he went for his resentencing hearing, it was viewed as an aggravating factor during his resentencing, and so he ended up being sentenced to the maximum 45 years for each count to be served consecutively, which meant that he faced 90 years instead of 75.
Yeah, right. You can't fix stupid. Like,
it also did absolutely nothing to help Sarah's appeal, despite the fact that further evidence, the letter was forged, was found as well, because the guy who supposedly wrote it, like, he didn't admit to writing it, but he did admit that Richard asked him. The detective who received the letter from Richard never found an envelope that matched. Like, there was never an envelope with
it was just a loose piece of paper.
Yeah, it was just a letter.
It's a little bit like your birthday card. It was just like, it could be from anybody. Like,
yeah, exactly. The letter was supposedly written May 16th, 2001, and that same detective had ceased all correspondence between Sarah and Richard in order to execute a search warrant on July 17th. But then Richard only presented the letter in September or October of 2001. And he supposedly had kept it hidden, even though his cell was searched. Like,
right.
And as I said, the inmate, Steve Logan, did admit, yeah, he asked me to write it, but he wouldn't admit to actually doing it at that time. And finally, they had it fingerprinted. And the only fingerprints found on it were Richard and Steve Logan's, not Sarah's.
Interesting.
Now, the letter was used at her trial, but the new evidence surrounding it apparently made no difference to her appeals, as I said. Another controversy worth mentioning is Floyd Pennington. Why can't I ever say that name? Pennington. Also in September of 2001, Sarah was apparently writing letters to Floyd, who was also an inmate. Floyd's habitual crimes included child sexual abuse and robbery. He was awaiting sentencing for his latest charges when he met with the detective who worked the Andrew Cataldi and Tricia Nordman's case, and he offered to be an informant on the case. He wanted to meet with Sarah because he believed he could get her to take responsibility for the murders. So, the detective agreed, and Floyd relayed a message to Sarah when the time came that they should meet up at the hospital. They both had to fake illnesses. Right. So they did that. They faked ill, and they both were sent to the hospital. And he claimed that he had 3 to 4 hours to talk to Sarah. and that during that time, Sarah gave a full confession, admitting to the planning of the murders and coercing Richard to be the shooter. Now, despite the fact that he was looking to make a plea deal on his own charges, and the fact that he had been in the same cell block as Richard Hall for the previous 2 months before all of that happened, nothing changed Sarah's conviction. They were like, he testified at the trial, it doesn't matter, nothing matters.
I mean, it wasn't a retrial. They were having to go based on the things that were in her trial originally.
Yeah. So in 2008, she reached the end of the appeals process. And for what she did next, she is quoted as saying, "Once my appeals were exhausted, I had no hope left, and I chose to create my own justice. I escaped because I felt justified in doing so."
Escaped?
Mm-hmm.
Did she get some spoons, dig a hole?
Like I said, there's men. Sarah had developed some close relationships during her time in prison, including one with her former cellmate, Jamie Long, as well as a guard within the Rockville Correctional Facility by the name of Scott Spittler. Scott had been a guard at the facility for about 5 years and by all accounts was an upstanding and trustworthy guard. However, he had developed some personal and relational difficulties, and in what his coworkers describe as a lapse in judgment, due to those difficulties, he allowed an inappropriate relationship to develop between himself and Sarah. Sarah and Scott discussed her escaping, with him explaining how he could get her out, and her offering him $15,000 for his assistance. Sarah basically states in an interview that their sexual relationship was just a side note. Like, oh, by the way, we also had a sexual relationship.
By the way, I did nothing.
But she swears that Scott agreed to help her because of the money.
Okay.
Once they had a plan in place, Scott gave Sarah a cell phone and charger to call Jamie Long and enlist her help once Sarah was out. And he also gave her a change of clothes.
Right.
On August 4th, 2008, Sarah changed into civilian clothes, hiding her uniform in the ceiling tiles of the prison gymnasium. She walked out of the gym toward the fueling station where prison vehicles are filled up. Scott was there fueling a van as he was working on inmate transportation at the time. He told her to get in the van and hide under the seat until he told her it was safe. Upon exiting the prison, he stopped at the gate and got out of the van. He later admitted that based on his experience, the guards would not search the van if he got out and walked into the guard shack to log his fuel intake.
Right.
So it worked. He got back in the van, drove off to the visitor lot where Jamie Long was waiting for Sarah. That same day, an inmate count showed that someone was missing and the prison went on lockdown. Sarah's clothes were found hidden in the ceiling of the gym, and the log showed only 3 vehicles that had been fueled up during the time frame she could have gone missing.
I was going to say, it was just way too simple of a plan.
Yes.
They're going to figure it out real quick.
Yes. Scott was questioned and he immediately folded.
Right, yeah, I saw that coming.
He admitted his part to her escape, but she was long gone. She was living outside of Chicago, I believe, under an alias for 4 months before an episode of America's Most Wanted aired, and someone recognized her and called it in to report her location.
Wow.
When she was taken back into custody, she was placed in the administrative segregation unit for 5 years.
Wow.
It's a smaller unit where inmates have individual 7x10 cells that they stay in for up to 20 hours a day, and they have no contact with the general population of the prison.
Horrible.
Sarah filed a complaint in court against multiple individuals within Indiana's women's prison system, arguing that the confinement itself and the conditions within her cell were harmful to her mental health, which was cruel and unusual punishment, and that their treatment of her violated her rights. The court granted the defendant's motion to dismiss in part, but denied in part. And I could not find the ultimate decision on that, but she actually had already, I think by the time they got through the whole process, she had already been released back to the general population.
Right.
Which kind of helped her.
Yeah.
She started doing a little bit better. Now back up to 2012. That prosecutor that was so convinced that she was the female Charles Manson and painted her as a villain, he had semi-retired and was working in a different county, but like never forgot the case. It was a big big deal, especially after she escaped.
Right.
So he assisted author Steve Miller, who was writing a book on Sarah. And when he dug back into the case and into one of the old detective files, he found a document that had never been disclosed to himself or the defense attorney during her trial.
Okay.
It was a snitch list belonging to Floyd Pennington. If you're wondering what that means, it was literally a list of people he was willing and able to help the police catch in exchange for a plea deal.
Yeah.
And he had signed it. So prosecutor Sells knew that it would have absolutely made the jury question Floyd's credibility. And he said, I would have never put him on the stand if I had known that.
Right.
I thought he was just helping in this one case. I didn't know that he was like, yeah, look at all these people I can help with. So prior to Floyd's deal with the detectives, Floyd had faced a 56-year sentence, but just months before he testified in court against Sarah, he was instead sentenced to just 12 years.
Whoa, that is a huge jump.
Not only that, but I'm pretty sure that I read, just a side note, I'm pretty sure that I read that he at some point shortly after his release of that 12 years, he turned around and raped someone. And ended up back in. And actually now I think he's in Miami, Florida, in a correctional facility there. Yeah, so isn't that great? So prosecutor Sells shared the information with the Marion County prosecutor at that time, who said that, well, Sarah would have a good argument for a new trial with that information. There was no investigation into the detective who neglected to submit the document to the attorneys or court because he had left the Indianapolis Police Department in 2006 and moved to Idaho, where he later resigned in 2008 from his position with the Ketchum Police Department after accusations of mishandling evidence.
Interesting. He's a bit of a Butterfingers, okay?
Yeah, he conveniently loses certain things. So Larry Sells became convinced that Sarah's account of events may have, in fact, been true. And thanks to his efforts, Sarah's attorney was able to prepare documentation that they hoped would lead to a new appeal. And the prosecutor's office said, we're open to reviewing new evidence. In 2019, more exculpatory evidence was obtained when Steve Logan, that inmate that wrote the letter, submitted an affidavit that he did in fact forge the letter that Richard Hall gave to the attorneys. So armed with that, Sarah began a clemency campaign. And right when she thought she saw a light at the end of the tunnel, COVID hit.
Oh, lovely.
With prisons locked down and government offices limited, Sarah's clemency hearing was postponed. And it had not been rescheduled as of June 2021 when and it's in my sources, the Progressive magazine highlighted her story. So I went through and searched the public notices for both parole and clemency hearings from June of 2021 all the way through September of this year. and I could not find Sarah's name on any of the lists. So it appears that it was never rescheduled.
Wow.
I found other articles and a blog from 2023, a group of Georgetown University students participating in the Making of an Exoneree program also reinvestigated her case, hoping to assist in getting her freed. But despite all the efforts invested by all these individuals and groups over the past decade, Sarah remains imprisoned, and according to the Indiana DOC inmate search, she is not projected to be released until February 11th of 2054.
Wow. All because her boyfriend was using and got into a fight with her roommate.
Drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. Because I'm sorry, like, I'm the first to admit that, yes, it kind of seems weird that she was like, I want to get rid of my roommate. I get it, but I just don't think she's the mastermind behind this. And there's no evidence to point to that. It just was a decided thing.
I can't help but feel that they keep pushing it off because of her escape. Because they never formally charged her for the escape.
Right.
So I can't help but think that that's why.
No, I mean, that does make sense because that's what they're gonna say.
Yeah. Why go through all the trouble of charging her and going through hearings and everything to actually bring charges for the escape when you can just push stuff off and
right, and like, she's still serving, and you're not. Yeah, it's not costing
and
money
it's
or
hard,
time.
and it's hard. Like I when I heard about the escape, I was like, oh, woman, you're literally like make it, and you had a sexual relationship with this guy, which is exactly what you were accused of. So it is, like I said, I honestly don't know. I'm not saying she's definitely not guilty. I'm not saying she's definitely guilty. Like I have no idea.
It is a weird, it's a pickle.
In the one documentary that she was one of many women featured, it wasn't just about her, so she's just in a few clips. But they interviewed a few different guards who talked about like her escape and all of that. And like pretty much the consensus is that they all think she's a highly skilled manipulator.
Wow.
So it's hard to say. Like, well, I mean, do they just think that because they're biased because they're, one of their coworkers was like caught up in that? Or is she actually like, I have no idea. To be fair,
she did basically kind of like come into adulthood in a prison. So it's like, that's kind of a taught behavior too. We don't have any, I don't know. It's just, that's weird.
Yeah.
You did a great job covering it. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And thank you, James, for suggesting it. And thank you to our patrons for picking it.
Yes. It was an interesting case.
Yeah, that was good.
I will just say this about it. The truth of the matter is he's not that much older than her, but he obviously was way more experienced. Like, it just seems weird to me that somebody that just kind of did some drugs and had a rebellious phase in high school, I find it hard to believe that she could like mastermind somebody who had already had that much of a record and had been in prison already. And
it just doesn't track.
I definitely think that if she were more involved in the planning of it, I think that it was a mutual thing. I find it hard to believe that.
I don't think it was planned. I mean, I think he had the truck and the gun, and that's all weird, but like,
yeah, and that being said,
it
true.
Could just be a
like it could have just gotten out of hand and he lost his temper. I truly, I don't think anybody knows except Richard and Sarah.
Let us know what you guys think.
Yes.
Do we have an emoji for this week?
If you've made it this far and you want to participate in our social media shout outs, go ahead and leave us the little running woman emoji for Sarah's escaping.
Meow. Ka-chow.
Yeah, for lack of a better one.
Yeah.
That's what we'll use this week.
Thank you guys so much, and I hope you're ready for some culty activity next week.
All right.
I'm excited. It's one of my, like, when we started the podcast, it was in my list of things I've, like, always wanted to cover. So.
Oh, nice.
I'm ready.
Exciting.
UFOs plus cult equals next week.
Oh.
Let's get into it, baby.
Okay.
If you guess correctly on social media, I'll give you a shout out. And we will talk to you guys next Thursday or whenever you listen.
All right. Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, guys. Find us on Instagram and TikTok at Burden of Proof Pod and email us at burdenofproofpod@gmail.com.